2-1. Good evening. I'd like to call the December 14th board meeting to order and welcome all our guests. Tonight is a very special night as we honor the CHS water polo team, who are the Citrus Coast League champions, CIF Division 5 champions, and CIF State Regional Division 3 runner-up. Congratulations. And please join us up here. I'm going to invite you all to stand right up here and face the TV and the whole crowd as I read your proclamation. Yes. Yes. I'd like everyone to stand up as I read your proclamation. Whereas the hard work, dedication, sportsmanship, talent, and exceptional team chemistry of the 2022 Carpinteria High School boys water polo team has enabled these student athletes to earn the 2021 Citrus Coast League Championship, the CIF Southern Section Division 5 Championship, and the CIF State Regional Division 3 runner-up. Whereas the 2021 Citrus Coast League champion Warriors entered the CIF Southern Section Division 5 playoffs and advanced by winning the round 2 match against Ramona at the Carpinteria Community Pool, the semifinal match versus Downey at Santa Barbara High School, and the championship final match versus Burbank at the Willette Aquatic Center in Irvine. This is the first CIF Boys Water Polo Championship in school history. Whereas the Warriors were invited to continue in the CIF State Regional Division 3 tournament and earned 2 more victories against Eagle Rock and San Diego Academy, and ultimately earned the first CIF State Regional Runner-Up Trophy in CHS history. All games were played in the Carpinteria Community Pool. Whereas the Carpinteria Unified School District recognizes the Carpinteria High School Warriors Boys varsity water polo team coaches Stephen Kim and John Osuki and the water polo student athletes for having demonstrated athletic skill, determination, and sportsmanship, and in the pursuit of their championship season, having conducted themselves in a manner that reflects positively on the entire student body and faculty of the high school, as well as the community of Carpinteria. Whereas the Carpinteria Unified School District recognizes the entire coaching staff, team member parents, faculty, student body at Carpinteria High School, and the community of the city of Carpinteria were integral in guiding the team to victory through their unwavering support. Now therefore, we, the Carpinteria Unified Governing Board of Trustees, do hereby proclaim and commend the Carpinteria High School Boys Water Polo team for winning the CIF championships for the first time in history in the city of Carpinteria. Congratulations.
Hold on, there's, if the board will, so because we cannot see the board, if you guys either move to the front or the boys like swings down a little bit, so, yeah, then just go like this, like the boys.
All right.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Stand on the table.
Oh, yes,
Right,
I
ready?
can, that's.
Monica's barely up there.
Got it.
Don't worry about it. And I know you have midterm exams tomorrow that you need to ace, so you're welcome to go home and study.
All right.
Okay, the next item is our organizational meeting. Ed Code Section 35143 72000, require the governing board to hold an annual organizational meeting to elect officers and to set the date, time, and place for all regular board meetings in 2022. So at this time, I will take a motion for nominations for the election of president.
I would like to, I would like to nominate Jamie Bray for president.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, guys. I'd be happy to continue on if everybody is good with that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jamie, and you'll continue with the nominations for vice president clerk.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to C1B, the election of the vice president clerk. Can I get a nomination?
I'll nominate Andy Schaefer.
I'll second that.
All right, well, thank you.
Is there any
It's all right with everybody?
concerns? Moving along for a non-COVID year. Keep us going. All right,
Yeah.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you. Item C2 is to establish our 2022 regular monthly board meetings. Board meetings in 2022 are scheduled for January 11th, January 25th, February 8th, February 23rd. That's due to President's Holiday. March 8th, April 12th, April 26th, May 10th, May 24th, June 14th, June 28th, July 12th, August 9th, August 23rd, September 13th, September 27th, October 11, October 25, November 8, November 22, and December 13th. Can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
All right, any concerns with those dates? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right, item C3 is the appointment of our board members to various committees. We will start with the 2022 County Committee on School District Organization Elections, currently being held by board members Green and Smith. Do you guys want to continue on those or get replacements?
It's fine with me.
I'll continue.
Since we didn't go to any meetings.
Fantastic, so we'll go Green and Smith. Andy, you're okay with alternate again?
Sure.
All right, next one is the 2022 Joint City Council Board of Trustee Committees, currently be held by Board Member Diamond and Schaefer. You guys want to continue on that one?
Yeah.
I'm good.
All good?
Unless
Good.
anybody else wants to. You good?
Simon?
All right.
You okay to be an alternative, Sally?
Sure.
Awesome. Lastly is the 2022 member of the California School Board Association Legislative Network. That's why I'm not on that one. Are you, want to continue with that one?
Yes, please. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Awesome. All right. Can I get a motion to approve the committees as outlined?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Perfect. Then we'll go on to D1, our flag salute.
All right.
Everybody please stand. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item D2 is our closed session report. In closed session, by unanimous vote, the board agreed to a resignation agreement and release with the certificated employee in exchange for the employee's resignation effective December 31st, 2021, and release of all claims. The employee will receive a lump sum payment in equivalent to the employee's remaining 21-22 annual salary and 6 months of health benefits at the same premium and contribution amount as if employee was employed by the district. All right, item D3 is just a report out on our elections and appointments. So we currently have myself as president, Andy Schaefer as clerk, committees for the district organization election is Green and Smith. The 2022 Joint City Council is Diamond and Schaefer with an alternate of Green, and Jamie Diamond will be the 2022 member of the California School Board Association Legislative Network. Item D3 is the approval of the minutes. Can we get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item D5 is approval of the agenda and consent agenda. We are going to pull item E2 from the,
Yeah, you skipped,
There's 3 minutes.
yeah, you skipped one.
oh,
All three.
got it.
I move to approve all 3 sets of minutes.
Oh, good job.
I second.
All right, roll call.
Oh,
Nope.
no, this
Well,
is,
this is Drew.
It's the
You
consent
think, oh,
agenda.
this is the first time I'm doing this. Dear Lord. Okay, all those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right, item D5 is approval of the agenda and consent agenda. Now we're going to remove item E2, as we need to change the date on that item. So can I get a motion to approve D5 minus E2?
Move to approve?
Second?
And now we have a consent agenda. Nope, now we have a roll call.
Aaron,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
Jamie,
Aye.
and I'm aye.
Thank you. Item F1, the school board.
I did that.
We've already done that. Item F2, our student representative report.
Alrighty, so finals begin tomorrow at Carpenter High School, and the fall semester ends on Friday, December 17th. We'll be on a minimum schedule Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. ASB held a food drive this past 2 weeks. The winning class was Mr. Lopez's class. The food will be donated to the local food bank to support our community. Our winter sports are in full swing. Many athletic events will take place during winter break. There is an app to download the athletic schedules for all of those, so everyone can come out and support all the athletes over the break. Our Muses Theater production class had 4 showings of the fall production, The Hope and Heartache Diner. They are now working on what will be our spring performance, which I believe is a musical. The CMS and CHS musical programs had their winter concert last Friday. Both parents from both schools were able to come and see students perform. Our first day back from winter break will be Thursday, January 6th.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Natalia.
Thanks, Natalia.
All right,
Good luck on your finals.
yeah. All right, item F3, Diana, your report?
Sure. And Natalia, you're welcome to leave because I know you have finals tomorrow. Right, thank you. So I'd like to begin with appreciation. We are grateful for the office coordinators at our schools who ensure that all staff and families are supported and well-served. At Catalino Family School is Letty Garcia, Heather Cushneys at Summerlin, Liz Uribe at Aliso, Cruz Martinez and Sonia Rodriguez at the middle school. Beatrice Sibia is at the high school, and Florence White and Monica Botello are at People Services. We appreciate their good work. The next item is student and family vaccines. Santa Barbara County Public Health provided a free COVID-19 vaccine and flu clinic for students and their families on Thursday, December 9th at the middle school gym. And this week, we're partnering with Save On, and they'll provide a clinic, a Pfizer clinic for students 5 to 11 years of age, Friday, December 17th, 4 to 7 p.m. The next item is in reference to Santa Barbara County Public Health. On December 3rd, the Santa Barbara County Health Officer extended the health officer order, which requires the use of masks in indoor public settings. This order requires all individuals, regardless of vaccination status, to wear face coverings when indoors in public settings with limited exceptions. Additionally, this health officer order aligns with state guidance for students in grades K through 12, actively participating in school-based extracurricular activities such as sports and band. Students may participate in indoor activities without a face covering if regular testing is conducted. CHS basketball players are tested weekly to be able to play without masks. CMS science classes. CMS 6th grade students completed several exciting labs related to living things, beginning with cells and leading to complex body systems. Hands-on labs have included identifying the characteristics of living and non-living things and gathering evidence to show how the body maintains chemical balance and homeostasis. Students explored plant and animal reproduction, including the dissection of locally donated flowers and lilies. Following their dissection, they designed and engineered flowers adapted to pollinators and the most effective methods for dispersing seeds to increase chances for survival and reproduction. Currently, students are conducting a 3-day lab that simulates 6 of the major body systems: respiratory, circulatory, digestive, nervous, muscular, and excretory systems. In 7th grade science, students have been exploring the properties of matter. After learning about how scientific theories develop over time, students learned about the periodic table and how atoms interact. Under a microscope, they explored extended chemical structures such as crystals. Building off their knowledge, they learned about the states of matter through hands-on multi-day labs investigating the properties of solids, liquids, and gases under different conditions. To connect students' learning to their personal experiences, they made ice cream from scratch using their understanding of changes of states of matter, freezing point of a liquid, and energy exchange through exothermic reactions. Students continue the exploration of matter by learning about the properties and indicators of chemical reactions. This unit finished with a lab in which students combined solutions to gather evidence to determine if a chemical reaction occurred. And in 8th grade science, students started the year discovering how to use the scientific process through inquiry-based lessons. One topical activity was the effectiveness of face masks, where students attempted to blow out a candle wearing a variety of face masks. They also used scientific processes to create elephant toothpaste, where the variable was the amount of hydrogen peroxide used to make the most foam. Students just finished a unit on Newton's laws of motion. They used their engineering skills and worked as a team to make the most functional roller coaster from foam, insulation, and marbles. They had a budget of $1 million of money to purchase all the necessary equipment for their project. Students also used Newton's laws to simulate the landing of the Mars rover by fabricating a device to hold an egg and keep it intact when dropped from a height of 10 meters. As they move into the formation of the solar system, students will use claim, evidence, and reasoning to investigate the Big Bang Theory. They will use magnets and iron fillings to represent gravitational pull, as well as make a model of the planets using their mathematical skills to calculate a scale model of each planet's diameter and its distance from the sun and each other. Don't you wish you were in middle school science? Okay. California Health Kid Survey. This is a modular, anonymous online assessment for students, parents, and staff in grades 7, 9, and 11, and for parents and staff of grade 5 students. It is focused on the 5 most important areas for guiding school and student improvement: student connectedness, learning engagement, motivation, and attendance; school climate, culture, and conditions; school safety, including violence and victimization and bullying; physical and mental well-being and social-emotional learning; and student supports, including resilience, promoting developmental factors. The 21-22 CUSD Healthy Kids Survey will be available in January 2022, and we encourage all grade 7, 9, 11 students, staff, and parents, and grade 5 staff and parents to complete the online survey. Survey links will be distributed by school site administrators. The next item is student mental health. On December 7th, U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy issued a public health advisory on the mental health challenges confronting youth, an emerging crisis exacerbated by pandemic hardships. According to the advisory, symptoms of depression and anxiety have doubled during the pandemic, with 25% of youth experience depressive symptoms and 20% experience anxiety symptoms, and in early 2021 emergency department visits in the U.S. for suspected suicide attempts were 51% higher for adolescent girls and 4% higher for adolescent boys compared to early 2019. CUSD provides a tiered system of student mental health support with school-based mental health teams at every school site, social-emotional learning curriculum, school psychologists, school counselors, and school-based mental health therapists from Family Service Agency, Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, and hospice. The district mental health team, facilitated by Special Education Director Carla Curry, meets on a monthly basis to discuss the mental health challenges faced by our students and how to provide mental health support in our schools. This year, the CUSD mental health team has planned for the district's first suicide screening for 7th and 9th grade students over the last 2 weeks of January 2022 in order to create a safety network in our school community so that any students thinking of suicide are identified early on and kept safe. Additionally, the California Department of Education and San Diego County Office of Education have partnered with Living Works to provide free online suicide prevention training to all middle and high school leaders, teachers, staff, and students. Living Works is a 90-minute online training program that equips people with the skills and confidence to recognize and respond when someone is thinking of suicide and help them to keep safe. The faculty and staff at Carpinteria Middle School and Carpinteria High School will be receiving the Living Works online training for suicide prevention during the months of December 2021 and January 2022. And then the last item is Measure U. A large construction crew is moving the CHS administration building along quickly. The walls and roof sheathing will be complete by winter break. The interior furniture and finish selections have been finalized and will be ready to order early next month. Dry weather has allowed for good progress at Summerlin School up until today.
Yeah.
Hopefully, weather permitting, the soil work should be done by the end of winter break, and which is good news for our schedule. The Measure U team meets weekly to discuss current and summer 2022 projects. Our architect, Robert Robles, is working to prepare bid documents for the last phase of Catalino modernization and the main school paint and roofing project for early 2022. The Summerlin Tennis Court project is in the design phase and will begin upon the completion of the new Summerlin School. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you, Diana. Does anybody have any questions for her? All right, awesome. We're gonna move on to F4. We are gonna be having a presentation from Trevor Lysek, a CPA, from CPA Advanced Revenue and Tax Administration Office of the Auditor Controller, the Santa Barbara County, and you'll be presenting the property tax allocations for our district.
Good evening, members of the board and staff. Maureen, nice to meet you in person. Thank you. Yeah, again, my name's Trevor Lysek. I'm the division chief for the Advanced Revenue and Tax Property Tax division of the County Auditor Controller's Office. And with me tonight is also Ed Price. He is the Assistant Auditor Controller to Betsy Schaefer, who's the Auditor Controller. Maureen had asked me to come down here. There's a request to get an overview on the property tax process, how the property taxes are collected and allocated, and then some questions about maybe the economic trends and AV growth. And so we have a little agenda there. I'm going to try and move through it as fast as I can because there's just a lot. I'm going to skip past some, but it's in the document if you want to look past it, dates and things. The first thing to think about is sort of the overall process. So if you look at, you maybe have it there, on the left-hand side you'll see there's the property owner or taxpayer, and on the right-hand side are the county, the cities, the school districts and special districts, all the taxing entities, and in between there are 3 county departments that have a part to play. There's the county assessor who values all the property as of January 1st of each year. They then pass that information along to us, the Auditor Controller's Office, by June 30th, and that's what we call the certified tax roll. We take that value and extend, actually we collect fixed charges, which might be parcel taxes. You guys don't have one, but like Hope School District has a parcel tax, and then other charges, sanitation fees, lighting fees, mosquito abatement, this sort of thing that different special districts have. They send that information to us. We extend the tax roll based on the values, including the bond tax rates to come up with the tax levy, and we pass that along to the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office. They issue the bills, send out the bills. You guys have probably seen those. As a taxpayer, you take those and you happily send your checks into the Treasurer Tax Collector. That's you over on the left paying your bill. It comes back in, and after we've collected that money, after the tax collector has collected that money, that comes into funds which we in the Auditor Controller's Office, in my division, we allocate that out to the county, the cities, and the school districts. And again, I mentioned that lien date is January 1st. That's when we value it. There's a number of dates here. June 30th is when they're supposed to get the levy to us. During the summer months, we are doing that extension of the tax roll. And then actually the unsecured bills for businesses and so forth go out in the beginning of the summer. October 1st, the secured annual bills go out to homeowners. And then we collect that throughout the year. I'm going to kind of skip past that too. So the main things to understand under Prop 13, for those of you who may not have been around to see Howard Jarvis ranting about it, the main thing that came out of Prop 13, and that was passed in 1978, is it limits the basic tax to 1% on most property taxes. And in addition to that, it's based on the value. At that time, it was based on the assessed value of properties from 1975-76 tax year. And that assessed value is not to increase more than 2%, the lesser of 2% or CPI each year. And that's an important limitation on there. And then also reassessment of properties only occurs on the change of ownership and or if there's completion of new construction. There's also a legislative vote requirement if there's going to be any increase in state taxes of a 2/3 vote. So you rarely see that happen. Local taxes and assessments also, such as school bonds, need to be approved by a 2/3 vote of the electorate. So there are 3 property tax rolls essentially. There's the secured property tax, and that's the secured tax roll. The local secured tax roll is what most people think of, people's homes, buildings, land. The unitary tax roll is part of the secured roll, but that's assessed, that's for like power lines and pipelines, that's assessed at the state level, and they send that to us. That's combined into the secured tax roll. The unsecured tax roll is your business property, boats, airplanes, racehorses, and whatnot. And that can be differentiated a little if you have a small business operating out of your home. That may just be on the secured roll. But if you're leasing property and operating a business, then the business property is separate from the real property. And then, of course, there are delinquent or redemption rolls for any of those for people who have defaulted. So what is tax administration? Basically, we extend the assessed values, as I mentioned earlier. We generate the levy, we calculate the tax rates and bills. We maintain that. We have corrections coming through all year long. And those can arise just from clerical errors or what have you on the assessor side. It can also arise from assessment appeals that are a pretty common occurrence. Those actually tend to account for the larger corrections. Let's see, and then we apportion the taxes after collected, as I mentioned, and then there's various reporting requirements. And here's what your bill basically looks like, and it's kind of small up there, but you can see the values in the upper right-hand side and the values that are calculated. And down on the lower left, you can see the basic 1% tax is that $5,900 value there, and that's 1% of the value up on the top. And you see all your school bonds coming in below that, fixed charges that I mentioned below that. So when it comes to the apportionment of the taxes, an important piece to understand is, at a certain level, is Assembly Bill 8. This came shortly after the approval of Prop 13, when the legislature had to figure out how to make it actually work, and they needed a way of allocating the taxes out. So essentially what AB 8 does is it allows us to aggregate the taxes the way they come in. So we look at all of it introduced the concept of a tax rate area. So if you look at how all of the school districts and all the other special districts and the cities and so forth overlap, all those little areas in between are what we call tax rate areas. And each one of those has a percentage breakout to all the jurisdictions that cover that space. So imagine, a bunch of them overlapping, and you got 5 different districts and the city and county that are kind of overlapping in that area. They each get a percentage of what's in there. What we do is they started with the growth from back in 1978, or rather the revenues, the property tax revenues from 1978. Every year since, they take in all those little tax rate areas, they say, how much assessed value growth do we have? Multiply that by the tax rate. What's the percentage that each jurisdiction gets in the little tax rate area? Then we take all those little bits and add them up by jurisdiction. How much does CARP Unified get? And we track that, and then we take that amount of revenue and put it on top of the revenue you got before. You have to imagine this is back, before we had the computing technology that we have today. I can remember in the 80s walking through the Cal Poly computer science room and seeing punch cards on the floor. And this was 5 or 6 years before that. So going back, they had to figure out a way of making this possible for the volume that we had. So it essentially comes out to the same as if you collected the money and parsed each bill out and sent the dollars to where they should go. It's formulaically, it should come out to the same place, but with a little bit of delay. Okay, bond tax rates. You guys are probably pretty familiar with this, but just so you know the process, that's calculated by our office. Long about August 10th, all of the information is due in, and we look at that assessed value as of January 1st. We say, what is the debt service required for all the school bonds? And we don't just look at the current year, but if you have interest debt service for the next 5 years and then a big principal payment, 5 or 6 years out, what we're going to try and do is look at that and try and come up with a tax rate that sort of smooths that rate. We don't want to, have low tax rates for 5 years and then spike it way out. We want to smooth that so that we can pay the debt service over time. We also try and balance that, between the issuances, so that as a school district, people are seeing, one may go down while another goes up, but in total, it kind of balances out. We try. As you know, schools issue bonds at different times, and that can be tricky, but we do our best. Let's see, a few things that are specific to CARP. You guys probably know most of this, but for posterity, you guys do participate in the teeter plan, and essentially that's us factoring you factoring receivables. So we pay you your full levy, and then we take the if people are late and they have penalties, we collect the penalties. But by year end, we've paid you your entire levy. You're a basic aid school district. Because of that, you don't receive supplemental taxes. You know what? I think back on the slide with the different roles, I forgot to mention supplemental taxes. If you don't know, those are, that was enacted a few years after Prop 13, the point of which was to collect the value increase from a time a property is transferred or the new construction is completed. From that time, let's say it happens in December, through the end of the year. So it was an effort to capture that increased value through the remainder of the year. As a basic aid school, you guys don't get a share of supplemental taxes. I didn't make the rules, just the way it is. But you do get the value. When that value hits the annual roll on the following January, you do see that increase.
So you're speaking of the Prop 98 guarantee, right? With that? Is that no? So who gets that money that, say you collect, say so a house sells in February, and you've assigned whatever revenues the district's gonna get in January, and you collect this additional increased amount of money, where does that money go?
Yeah, it gets allocated out to the other taxing entities and to the non-basic aid schools. So basic aid schools don't get a share of it. So imagine again, if you, in your example, if the property is transferred in February, we go to the end of the month. So basically March 1st through the end of the year is 1/3 of the year. We take that portion of the value increase. So let's say it goes from $100,000 to $200,000 property. You have a $100,000 increase, times 1% is $1,000, and you're going to take 1/3 of that. So that $300 gets divvied up between those other entities. The basic aid schools don't get a portion of that, but it does increase the assessed value. So on the following January, that value has gone up, and that affects the annual bills. You do get a portion of that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, you also don't receive a portion of the ERAF allocations. That stands for Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. Again, that goes to the non-basic aid schools. You do get the basic 1%, everybody does, and then you have bond revenues. That goes directly to the bond funds to pay debt service. Currently, you have the 1995 Measure A and the 2014 Measure U. Obviously, you're familiar because you guys were talking about how you're using that money just a few minutes ago. And you guys don't levy any school parcel taxes. You don't have an RDA down here, which works to your benefit. And there is a little bit of oil, mineral, and gas property down here, but not a whole lot, so you're not heavily impacted. by changes there. Now this is just kind of a graphic to, show how that money is split out, again, to the county, the dependent special districts. Those are special districts run under the county umbrella. We have cities, independent special districts, school and community colleges, and then the RDA trust funds. And this is a graphic from this 2021, and there was about $91 billion worth of property and 146,000 parcels. And so that basic 1% tax is about was for this year about $911 million allocated between those. And the next slide is just sort of a percentage breakdown, so you have kind of a view of what that looks like. You can see big chunk, 48% goes to the schools, about a quarter goes to the county general fund, and the balance goes to those other taxing entities. Okay, so the graphic that comes after that shows two lines. The angled one being basically the value over time, and the blue line being that measure of growth happening each year. I know assessed value growth is a big issue for you guys, and you can see that's gone up and down, but steadily the value has gone up. It's just, with those certain years where we've had, you can see the mid-90s got a little bit flat. After the Great Recession, got a little bit flat there for a while, but it continues to go up. This one's kind of small on my screen. I don't know if you can tell. I know I had a hard time identifying which color was which. I believe the very bottom line, which is kind of a pinky mauve color, is the Carpinteria pink, and the pink that's up kind of in the middle, I think that's the county. My best reading of that. And so this kind of shows you how, prices did dip. If you look at the Carpinteria area specifically, it did dip down following the Great Recession, and it has slowly kind of come back up. We hear a lot in the market about how the real estate market's just going crazy, the values are really high and so forth. But you can see a lot of that is from the collapse in the areas of like City of Santa Barbara and Montecito, the blue and the green lines at the top. That came down a lot and then also went back up faster as well. So which jurisdiction you're in has a lot to do with it. This is just another graphic. Every month the assessor updates this. And I should note, I just got, since I sent the slide down here, the next iteration for November 30th. And there at the end, the same way it has in prior months, that spike goes back down nearly to the bottom of the, does this have a pointer on it? Oops. No, I think I just turned it off. Well, I don't know if there's a pointer. But the dip that's a few months prior to now, it goes back down to about there. So it's going up and down seasonally. You can see, obviously, that's really spiked. Oh, this is a graph of the documentary transfer tax, which is a leading indicator of sales. So this is the tax when you close your escrow, you'll pay 55 cents per $500 of transaction value. So this is an indicator of those supplemental taxes that will be coming in, as well as what the growth will be in the subsequent year. So you can see obviously a spike out there towards the end, but if you look down towards the bottom, you can see it's got a very seasonal pattern. I drew a straight line across the bottom, and you can see that those volume bar graph markers down at the bottom are a little bit higher, but they're not that much higher. Mainly what we're seeing is just a real spike in some of the values. So how does that, I think probably the burning question, how does that affect the growth and how much revenues you guys are going to get? So yeah, I've gotten a lot of questions this year about, well, it's kind of been circulating amongst school districts and other districts. If the market's going so crazy, why aren't we getting a whole lot more money? It's a good question. We have to go back to the Prop 13, all the things that I showed you kind of lead up to that. So based on Prop 13, if the value, if you don't transfer the property or have new construction, and the value increase is only able to increase by the lesser of 2% or CPI, this last year, because of COVID, we only had just barely over 1% CPI in California. Now, what you're hearing now is that inflation's gone up to about 6%, right? So this year will be capped at 2%, even though everything else has gone up 6%. So it's unfortunate that for us, but that is the way that is. So that's a limiting factor. And I did a little research. I don't have a graphic for it, but you see the first bullet point, only 7.5% of properties transfer each year. And that's a generalization. I look back at like the last 8 years. The last 2 years, we don't have everything processed through the system, but the 6 years prior to that, it was about the same number of properties transferring every year for more or less the same value, and we see only about 7.5% of those actually transferring in a given year. So the market can be going crazy, values are high. The other 92% is only went up 1% last year, and 2% in the years before that, and probably 2% next year. So that's a huge limiting factor. Regardless of what you see going on, that's a big, limit on what you're going to get. Let's see, what's my next point here? The AV growth is based on the new value versus the prior assessed value. And so when that occurred has an impact too. So in the example we talked about earlier, if you transfer a property in February, we just got the lien date was January 1st, transfer of property. That lien date of January 1st is used to create, let's see, if we're talking this year, that would be used to create the 21-22 tax roll and the tax revenues that you receive. If that property transfers in February, and because you're a basic aid school, you're not going to see the supplemental taxes, that increase is going to hit for January 1st, 22, and that's going to be used for 22-23 tax year. That's when you'll see the revenues. So there's a big lag time between when the transfers actually take place to when you see the revenue. The other thing is that we also have base transfers that are in there that can be a limiting factor. Properties that are passed from parent to child, grandparent to grandchild. We'll talk about Prop 19 in just a minute. And then where you're at. Like with the graph with the locations, the CARP area, as well as the Montecito, Santa Barbara, we see that growth in those areas, but if the growth is not within your jurisdiction, you don't necessarily see the revenues from it. And then, of course, there's always roll corrections, and I mentioned the process where people can file assessment appeals if they don't agree with the valuation on their property. And unfortunately for us, they tend to only do that when they want the value lowered so that their taxes are lowered. So that tends to not have a positive impact on your revenues, only negative. And those tend to be the bigger ones. So those are some of the reasons that that the revenues don't necessarily reflect what you see happening economically in the market. And then finally, just to mention Prop 19, see if you guys have any thoughts or questions on that. If you recall, if you did pay attention to it at the time and look through all the details, essentially what it's doing is, well, start with what we had. We had Prop 60, which allowed for somebody over 55 to transfer the base value in their given property to another property when they move. And Prop 90 allowed people to do that between reciprocating counties. That was essentially replaced by Prop 19. And then we also had Prop 58, which allowed for parent to child or grandparent to grandchild transfers of the base value. With Prop 19, 60 and 90 were replaced, and so anyone over 55 or severely disabled or victims of wildfire, and actually I believe that also includes firefighters and first responders or victims of disaster, they're all available to get this, and they can do it up to 3 times instead of once. And they can transfer that to any property, split the base if they're moving up, which allows extended use. And of course, being able to transfer across county lines gives a lot of leeway. In aggregate, we kind of expect that that's going to have a little bit of a negative impact on Santa Barbara County. Obviously, we have high values here. If somebody's coming from a home they've owned for a long time in San Bernardino or Fresno or something like that, it's likely that they're bringing a lower value here than somebody who is moving from Santa Barbara, say, to one of those locations. So we do expect to have a little bit of a negative impact there. On the other side with the parent to child, grandparent to grandchild, this is more of a limitation on that. So under Prop 58, you could transfer rental properties and what have you to your children or grandchildren. Under Prop 58, you can only do that, or transfer the base value, that is, only if they use it as their principal residence. And even that's limited to $1 million of increase. So that's going to limit that base transfer, which means it's going to limit that exemption from taxes, meaning it'll help you out a little bit on the revenue side. We really don't know how much of an impact this is going to have, but I thought I'd mention it because it does have an impact here, and it may be something you have questions on. You know what? I wanted to step back to this. Really a big point that I missed when I was talking about the growth was simply the fact that, you know, we see the market really going crazy, but one huge factor is who's selling what property. If you've owned your property since 1980 and you're selling it today, that's going to be a huge increase. But if you bought your property back in, you know, 2016, and you're going, oh wow, I don't know, the market's going to crash, I think I'll sell and get out of this, we're not going to see a real big increase. So the market can be huge, the documentary transfer tax can be huge. We still don't necessarily see that much growth from it. It all depends on who's selling. And disclaimer, just me thinking, hypothesizing, it's possible that that last sample where people who just bought into the market could be going, maybe not such a good idea. Or maybe I just flip this and make a little money. So that can be a limiting factor on what's going on. Anyway, that's all I really had. I don't know if you guys have any questions.
I do.
Go right ahead.
Shoot, Andy.
Okay, so, thank you for that. I think we got the fact that there's a plethora of reasons why our taxes are probably lower than we expect. Can you walk us, but it's kind of complicated. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of things that are pretty, frankly, obtuse for the layman to understand. And so can you walk us through the procedure on how you develop the estimated property tax increases for a basic aid school district like Carpinteria? So how does that process, you know, we say we're starting at a base value of $20 million, just for round numbers. And that was a 4.5% to 5% increase from the previous year. So for 21, 22, we're starting with $20 million. And that was a 5% increase over 1920, right? How do you develop the projected increase for the subsequent year?
Well, first of all, whenever we get the questions earlier in the year, you know, long about January, you know, when everyone wants to start looking at things, any estimate we give out comes with the disclaimer that this is really very preliminary, and all we're doing is looking at the most preliminary information we have from the.
When does that number get firmed up?
June 30th.
Okay, so how do you develop that number June 30th?
Yeah, so at June 30th, we get the certified annual roll from the assessor.
Okay.
And at that point, they should have verified that all of the transfers and new construction from the prior year have made it onto the roll. And that's updated, and all the exemptions that have been applied for have properly been added, and so those exemptions are in there, which reduces the assessed value. And then to explain our process during the summer, during the that July 1st through 15th period, we are creating the unsecured tax roll. Those are required to go out by the end of July because they're due by August 31st. Those are based on the prior year's tax rates. tell me if it's more detailed than what
Oh,
you're actually
you're
asking
talking about
for.
personal property tax, essentially. Unsecured is essentially.
Unsecured, boats,
Yeah.
airplanes, racehorses, but primarily it's business property.
Equipment.
So fixtures, tenant improvements, all this kind
I'm
of
very
stuff.
familiar.
Yep.
Personally, I'm very familiar with
Yeah,
personal
exactly.
property tax.
So that's going out, and that's due by August 31st, and so we're working on getting that out. Long about the end of July, we received the state assessed roll, and so that is unitary properties. Unitary meaning instead of having 100 different properties snaking through the county or all the cell tower sites or what have you, the state assesses that as a whole and then divides it up and sends the assessable or the taxable value to the county. So we get that about the end of July. And we've already received the local roll, the local secured roll from the assessor by that time. We are taking in all of the bond information from the schools and developing the tax rates for each of those bonds. And then by about the beginning of September, as well as the fixed charges, all the fees, parcel taxes, anything like that, long about the first couple weeks of September, or actually I should say end of August, we get those tax rates approved by the Board of Supervisors, and then we extend that out into the actual final tax rolls in the beginning of September. And at that point, that's where we have a split. So at that point, the tax bills are ready, we're getting those produced, they're going to print and going out to the taxpayers. And internally, then what we're doing is it goes to one of my staff, Claudia Ornelas, who is not here tonight. She could explain to you in better detail than I could exactly the process you're asking about. But essentially, when we translate that information to the J29s, which is where you guys get your information, there are changes. Let's see. If there are, if any amounts of property taxes are going to be impounded during the year, that is removed from the current revenues. And when they're eventually released from impound, we don't have any this year, so thankfully, it makes it a little easier. But when they are received, so they're removed from the secured taxes. When they're released, they come back in as in another column as a prior year tax or another prior year type of revenue. And then if there are any large adjustments that we've had to make.
What would trigger an impound?
Impounds come if we have large assessment appeals, and a couple real biggies that have affected the county have been United Launch Alliance. For anybody who doesn't know, that was a venture between Lockheed and Boeing.
Yeah.
Is that right? And they had appealed $35 billion or something like that at some point in the past. It lasted many years. And so ultimately, I think we had impounded
So essentially,
upward of $20 million.
It's
and we released it.
appealed tax
Yeah.
assessments. Okay.
SpaceX is another real biggie.
Okay.
But it happens with a lot of smaller companies too. We have frequently we get oil companies, some of the big hotels, big business. They're frequently appealing. Oh, we were doing construction longer than we expected to. This value, we shouldn't be assessed this value this year, but next year, and that sort of thing. So when we have those, when there are large ones that we think there could be some material effect to the revenue flow, we will impound a portion of those revenues. The simplest way of thinking about it is it's easier to hold back that revenue. If we think we consult with county council and the assessor's office to make a determination as to what we think the likely outcome might be for those appeals. And if we believe that there's going to be a material effect in terms of the recipients of the tax dollars, then we'll hold back a portion. And the easiest way of thinking about it is it's easier to give you less now than to ask for it back after you've spent it.
So what happens to
So
the?
we're setting it aside in
Yeah,
case
so
we
what
have to
happens
give
to
them a
the
refund.
delta between what you've, estimated is safe and ultimately what you collect if it's greater than what that estimate, what happens to that amount of money?
Yeah,
That-
so
that-
basically, we're setting it aside, and if we, let's say we determine there's a 50-50 chance that we could need to issue a $500,000 refund, just for sake of discussion, right? Then we set aside the $500,000. When it's decided, it's no different than any roll correction. If we just found an error on your tax bill, we get a roll correction from the assessor's office. They might say, well, actually, the roll correction is going to be $700,000 downward, in which case we release that, we correct the property tax roll, which reduces your property taxes by, what, $7,000 on the $700,000. But then we release the cash impounds to sort of make up for that.
Trevor?
Similarly, if it's the other direction, then there's a little left over and you get a
So
bump
it's
up.
not treated the same as the, supplemental,
Supplemental.
where you assess something after you've made your given us our, estimated, and then that money gets allocated or
No,
distributed to someone else.
No. The impounds, so, to understand that, we set aside the money, we impound the money with the same calculation as how it was allocated. So we apportion the money out, your district gets a portion of that. If we're gonna set aside $1 million because there's a big taxpayer in the CARP district, we would set that aside, and when we release it, that portion of revenue that you were shorted at the time of impounding, that's gonna go right back to you. It just comes in a different column on the
So-
J29 report.
So on the J29, when I talk about the adjustments, some years they're negative 200,000 or positive 5,000 or positive 700. That's reflected in the adjustments, and then in the subsequent year, it's added into the secure. Is that correct? Often? So those adjustments that are on the J29 under secured,
There are adjustments, and that's a different thing.
those are not release impounds.
If I understand the way you were saying it, I don't think so.
Okay.
If I understand. Let me just say it a different way. So there are adjustments to the secured or the unsecured columns on the J29. And those could be positive or negative. When we impound money, it comes out of the secured or the unsecured. When we release it, it comes back in as, I don't remember the title, other something. Does that make sense?
That's basically what I mean, yeah.
And just as a note, we were, in past years, we have taken a more cautious or conservative approach on your behalf. And looking back at that, our assessment was, well, maybe that's more than necessary, and maybe the confusion might outweigh the benefit. So we've started taking a closer look at that and really tried to say, let's look at what's really material, not anything that just seems big, but anything that's really material. And so what we've been working at is really releasing the impounds that are there as we get to the end, and only impounding new money if it's really a big deal.
So
And this year, we did not impound anything new, and we're gonna try and get that, just because it makes it causes this confusion, so.
So after the J29 is developed, and you give it to the school district, then there's some point in time where you come up with a much closer number to actual reality, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah, so, and that's where we had kind of left off, is that we're.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are adjustments, And these can come about if we just know that there's a really big roll correction in the pipeline, and we don't want to, like, we know that correction is coming. Not an appeal that might, but we know there is a correction. Example, we have some large corrections from the Board of Equalization on some of the unitary properties. I'm not sure if those made it in there, if we knew about those on this. So that can happen. The calculation we do, I explained the AB8 and those factors. Essentially, we go through the calculation to come up with a percentage of the whole, of that entire 1% countywide that each jurisdiction is going to get, okay? And then what we do is we say, what's the secured, what's the unsecured, we get backfilled for the homeowners exemptions that are on there. There are redevelopment agency trust funds for the dissolving redevelopment agencies. We calculate those amounts. We come up with a net amount at the end based on the information that we have. What we also do is we factor into that a small amount of shrinkage, for lack of a better word, because on the whole, year in, year out, the roll tends to shrink a little bit by the time we get to year end. There's roll corrections, there's the assessment appeals and so forth. There's also a little bit of delinquency on the unsecured roll because that does not get teetered. So we factor that in, and that decreases that amount by a little bit. We come up with the total amount, and that's what goes on to the revenue estimate worksheets that we send out to the districts.
That's the one in July? That's October.
I think we usually get that up at
the final?
First half of September.
Is that the final?
It's revenue estimates.
Okay, so
the final, I mean, the final in a sense is when we get to the end of the year and, you know, we see that there are no more corrections for the year and the
what
tax have
happened?
been
What
collected.
happens? Say you develop a revenue estimate, and you come to the end of the year, and you have actual revenues that are higher than that estimate. What happens to those dollars?
They get apportioned out in the same way. Yeah, so if, as an example, if the assessor went through the course of the year and determined across a number of assessments of properties, or similarly, we also have a correction, I want to say it's on Frontier, California, that's from the Board of Equalization, multi-million, $47 million, I think, increase. I can't remember don't quote me on that. I could be misremembering the numbers. It's a big increase from the state level. If those increases outweigh the decreases in the other property tax, we actually took in more tax dollars. It actually increased the tax levy. Those tax dollars are going to get apportioned out to the districts in the same manner, using the same AB8 factors that were developed with the original numbers.
So the way I understood the teeter, the way it was explained to us, was that we get our revenue estimate at the beginning of the year, and that if and say that's 4% increase over the previous year, and that if the end of the year in the amount comes out to say 4.8 or say 5%, so you're off by 0.8 of a point, and it increases that much. That money doesn't go because we're a teeter district. That money does not go back to the school district.
Yeah, those are two different things. Okay, so
that's what we're trying to figure out.
Gotcha. It's a good question. So teetering, or the teeter plan, is like factoring receivables. Basically, we pay you all your revenue, we get to collect the interest, kind of thing. That doesn't limit if there's an actual correction to the total amount of the tax levy. So if the total amount of the tax levy increases or decreases, that's going to get apportioned out to the district in the same manner as it would have if there had been no change. That what teetering does is when we get to that year end, whether the total amount of tax levy has increased or decreased, if there is a portion of that that is delinquent, it's unpaid, we don't make you wait until the taxpayer has paid. We're gonna pay you the total value of the levy as of year end, whether it's increased or decreased. We're simply taking the responsibility of collecting on those defaulted tax bills onto the county, and in return, we collect the interest, the delinquent penalties and the interest. But it's really to be able to advance to you the entire amount of the levy, again, whether it's increased or decreased.
That seems like that seems more free enterprise than it does government. I mean, that seems like you're taking a risk, and you're benefiting from that risk by collecting the interest and penalties or even the actual assessment, right, that would have gone to the district. That's I think what's unclear and what doesn't make sense to us, because and I don't mean to be dominating this, but so we're all pretty familiar with Carpinteria, and we've seen what property values have done. We've seen a lot of properties that have been in the same family, same ownership for many years, that have been sold. So they've been at a very low assessment. They've sold. We've seen greenhouses that have been turned into industrial, essentially, with the cannabis markets that were once assessed as ag, and now they're assessed as industrial. It's a different assessment. So that, and then we've seen this huge turnover and huge increases in our unincorporated areas, because a big part of our district, big part of our basis is the unincorporated areas of this South County. Summerlin, Padera Lane, Shepherd's Mesa, Foothill Corridor, Toro Canyon, and the turnover in properties, the amount of the appreciation in values don't jibe with the 4.2% increase that we're being told we have this year, especially when last year we saw a 4.8% increase in supposedly a flat year. So that, combined with the fact that it sounded like if the county underestimated our increases, our property tax increases, and they came in higher, that the county got to keep the delta, and it didn't get allocated to the district. And I think those are the big questions that we have that don't really make sense. And I'll leave it there, and if you guys want to follow through.
Okay, just a number of things to address there. First of all, we looked at the numbers that Maureen had sent, and I would say, it might be a good idea and we could do this for whoever is interested in doing it. It'd be good to sit down with Claudia, because she did the calcs on this, and I couldn't do it justice to explain the numbers. But what we arrived at, and what's on the estimate, is that you guys had, I want to say it was a 4.5 or a 4.6 or a 4.56 growth percentage. We saw the estimate and your note to the effect that it was less than in prior taxes or in prior years, and we're seeing a 4.5 or 6 growth this year, not a 4.2. So we can work on figuring out what the difference is there and making sure that we're on the same page. I mean, part of this is that we send the J29s to County Ed. They post things in their system one way. You see it then when that comes out. And I'm not sure what the disconnect is, but we can work on that.
So what comes out of the county is usually different from what I get from the county.
Yeah, so we're making an estimate based on the revenues that are generated.
So
when the J29 goes to County Ed, I'm not sure what exactly happens there, because we're not looking at that piece.
And your growth percent is not necessarily what I'm doing in my historical data trend.
Yeah, and you can be tracking it a different way, and we may be looking at the same numbers with a different periodicity and come up with different percentages, but we see a 4.5 or 6 growth for this year. So that
yeah, and then the other thing about the teeter, so I've been in a couple teeter counties, but the biggest difference that I've experienced is that when you're not a teeter, you get only tax collected in December and April.
Right.
And it can, you pay the price for uncollected taxes. You don't get that money. And in the teeter, you're being guaranteed that you will get paid whether it's collected or not. And that's like the biggest caveat for teeter, if I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. I mean, you can, a good point that it is a little bit entrepreneurial, and perhaps that's what it was actually developed like back in the 30s by Desmond Teeter, I believe. And, that very well may have been an entrepreneurial look at that, but from the perspective.
It incentivizes the tax collector to actually be a tax collector, right? I mean,
Sure.
I mean, you're being,
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise okay, well, he's not gonna pay out. It incentivizes you to go out and get that money.
Yeah, but from, I mean, from our perspective, the biggest benefit is like Maureen said, it's making sure that you have stable revenue. So, do we take the penalty and interest for the, to recover the cost of trying to collect those taxes? Yes, and primarily that goes back to the tax collector and the assessor. We get a little piece, but really, it's the main benefit is to give you and the cities and all the other school districts and special districts a stable cash flow, so that you're not playing collection agent and trying to go out and get that stuff.
So, a couple of things that kind of brought us to the point of having you here.
Sure.
Your schedule for assessing and our schedule that we have to abide by legally are two very different calendars, and it's like we have to do some crystal ball work here, and it makes it very difficult for us to plan a year that we don't really have. All we have is like, well, we think it might be this.
Absolutely.
And then 6 months later, it's like, oh, well, it's actually this. But we've planned this, and then we have to do that. And we not only plan it for ourselves, but it also plays into negotiations with employees and with unions and buying supplies and what we're going to be able to budget for our special ed students and all these things that we have to do. And it makes it really difficult to do that. And it's been this dance that the district has played for years, but what really brought us to the point of wanting to have you here was two things that Andy kind of touched on. One is the idea that it seems, and I'm not saying this is the reality, but to us it seemed as though the county was underestimating something on our end, where this is what we got, and then if it came in over, you were hanging on to that difference, which is what Andy was alluding to. It didn't actually come back to us. If you said we were going to have $100,000, but that was an underestimate, and it really came out to 150, you got to hang on to that 50. We never saw that come back to us, even though it should have. It's just you underestimated, and then we lost out. So that was one. And the other is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm simplifying this, I know. Sure. Oversimplifying probably, but if your property is in the Carpinteria Unified School District, my home is in the Carpinteria Unified School District, and I assume that my school tax dollars are all going to Carpinteria Unified School District. And it was brought to our attention that that may not be the case, that it's going into a pot, getting shaken up, and then reallocated. So to across all districts in the county. So if your property is in Carpinteria Unified School District and you're under the assumption that the percentage from your taxes that's supposed to go to schools is going to Carp District, it actually isn't. Is that true or not?
Okay.
If you live in Carp Unified School District, your percentage that's supposed to go to schools, does it go to CUSD or does it not all go to CUSD?
It goes to CUSD, but it goes
to other districts as well.
Through the sausage grinder, let's say. Again, this is going back to the AB8 discussion. So, back in 1978, they looked at property values at the time. They looked at the revenue that different districts had at the time. And rather than taking each tax bill when you pay it and taking that revenue and figuring out how much goes to each district, The aggregate methodology of getting to that entails this process where we look at, again, each little tax rate area where all different jurisdictions overlap. We're going to take those percentages and we're going to look at what is the growth of the assessed value in that little area, the neighborhood, say, right over here. We're going to look at the growth in that area. We're going to calculate the taxes based on that. We're going to split that based on the percentage that's in place for each jurisdiction. So a little bit for CARP USD, a little bit for the city of CARP, a little bit for CARP Fire, and so forth. I don't know off the top of my head which are all the rest that are in there. We take all those little amounts of additional revenue that come from each one of those tax rate areas. We separate that out by the taxing jurisdiction. We add all of those up by taxing jurisdiction, so we come up with the total amount that CARP USD is getting above what they got last year in all the little tax rate areas that are within the CARP USD jurisdiction. We come up with that total. We do that for all the school districts, all the special districts, the cities and the county. We come up with then we add all those up and come up with a total for each jurisdiction. And then that arrives at what we call the AB8 factors. For the secured roll, it's AB8 factors. There's a slightly different calculation that excludes the basic aid districts for supplemental apportionment. And the unsecured uses the prior year. So, and then there's a slightly different calc for aircraft and railroad. Okay, so there's some different variations, but it's all a variation on this theme, which is a way of aggregating the growth and dividing it to come up with these percentage-based factors. Yes, it's completely arcane. And we come up with the factors, and then when I pay my taxes, when you pay your taxes, when we all pay them, they go into a bucket, and we use those percentages to take the collections to date at different points during the year and allocate that out to all the different districts. Mathematically, it should come out to the same thing based on the rules about things like supplemental doesn't go to basic aid districts. To respond to your question, you could make that argument that if you're paying supplemental taxes, it's not necessarily coming to CARP USD, but
it'll come around that next year.
The growth will for the annual, but those tax dollars, they won't come to CARP USD because you guys are a basic aid school, but it will go to the other jurisdictions in CARP. So you can say, well, yeah, we're not taking your taxes and giving it all to Lompoc or Santa Maria, but it is an aggregation process that we go through, and certain things don't come directly back to the school district, again, because you're basic aid.
So so the 1% from Prop 13.
Sure.
Okay, that gets divided amongst school district, fire district, all the different things like that. Okay, so 48% of that 1% is for school districts.
Yep.
So I'm looking up at my property tax bill right now.
Okay.
Okay, so my 1%, according to this, 48% of this $5,500 should go to Carpinteria Unified School District.
No, the 48%, that's an aggregate number for all the school districts, and that can vary from district to district.
I'm just trying to simplify it for our families to understand, because it's disconcerting that you're paying property taxes in your district and you think it's going there, but maybe it's not actually going there, all of it, right? So I'm just trying to get a simple answer. Does our tax dollars stay in Carpinteria?
Yes.
Okay. I just need
more to the point. A penny of yours goes to every district in the county, and then a penny of mine comes to Carpinteria also. Mathematically, it should come out to very close to essentially the same thing.
I feel like that's not what.
If
when
anything,
Maureen asked the question and presented to us, I feel like that's not what we were.
There's a time lag because of the way that the calculation works. But yeah, essentially your money, it's not the specific dollars from your check. We don't take
Yeah, I get,
$900 that you wrote.
but
and
the dollar
send it
amount,
just
maybe
to
not my
Carpinteria.
check, but the dollar amount,
Yeah.
I get that. But like, I'm not crazy, right? This is essentially what we were told, was that our money isn't actually staying here.
Well, maybe Maureen could,
It doesn't, it's like Trevor said, it goes through the meat grinder and it goes through all districts, not necessarily the school district. So we don't get supplemental taxes.
so I'm actually maybe not more confused than I was, but I'm still confused. So I think I tried to boil it down earlier. The big concern was that the county, I mean, we're all assuming our property to be, just based on anecdotal evidence of what the market's doing, what new properties have come into different valuation because of their status, mainly in the cannabis industry. But also this high turnover of properties that have been in same families and same ownership since pre-78 that have turned over, that I'm personally aware of dozens. And that so that was one concern, is that we don't feel the estimate was accurate based on just, what we're seeing around us. But also, and I don't think we misunderstood what we were told, was that if the county underestimated the value of our increase, that we did not, and then at the end, end of the year, that increase, or the actual collected taxes were greater than what the estimate was in June, that we did not see that increased revenue. That was I think the way we all understood what was explained to us. And so I think there's some disconnect here, but those are am I wrong? I mean, those are our two
That's
biggest
what I'm
concerns,
trying-
is that we're seeing what's going on in Carpinteria, in our, not just Carpinteria City, but the district, which goes all the way to Lambert, or all the way to Lambert. No, beyond Lambert. It goes all the way to
Evans, yeah.
the top of Summerlin, and it goes all the way to, essentially, it goes all the way to the county line, right?
Okay.
So it includes Toro Canyon, it includes all these, Pradera Lane, Shepherd's Mesa, and the fact that there's not a house in Carpinteria on the market for under $1 million right now, right? So there's all these things going on, and then we see our estimates are lower than they were in the prior year as far as the increase over year increase, and it just doesn't make sense.
Okay.
From a layman's perspective, it didn't make sense.
Okay.
Those are, does that boil it down?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, let me address that one. So, let's say you have a house that was valued at $100,000 and it sold recently for $1 million, but it's out here on Padero, and and so we issued a bill based on $1 million, and then midway through the year, the appraiser realizes, oh wow, I dropped to zero. That should have been $10 million. So now that parcel should be valued at $9 million more than it was assessed and billed at. And they do a roll correction, and we process that. They get a corrected bill, and now there's $9 million of value, or what is that, $90,000 in taxes. What I'm hearing you guys say is that your understanding from talking to somebody is, because we didn't estimate that, or we didn't include that in our estimate, that the county simply keeps that additional money for the county.
Or it gets
So-
reallocated, like you were saying,
So-
happens to the supplementals.
Okay, so let me say unequivocally, we are not just keeping it at the county and for you to not see anything from that. Maybe what whomever was explaining to that, maybe what they were trying to explain is that, so because that value was not known when we went through the process of coming up with through the whole process that I explained, we didn't know of that value. We didn't have that increased growth in that tax rate area at the time that we were calculating the factors, the apportionment factors. Because we didn't have that, the factors were based on the information that we had at the time. Now we get that roll correction, and the taxpayer gets their corrected bill, and they send a check for $90,000 to the tax collector. Those tax dollars go into the whole county bucket and are apportioned based on the allocation factors. So that $90,000, as you said, is getting apportioned out to the rest of the county. But the same thing happens if that happens in Goleta or in Santa Maria or Lompoc. It's happening all over the county. So throughout the year, we have appraisers in the assessor's office that are realizing there's some clerical error. We have the taxpayers that are filing assessment appeals, and in some cases winning some portion of that and having their taxes reduced. And so those reductions, those are happening all over the county. And when that happens, it reduces those tax bills or those tax levies, and that is also, those reductions are being apportioned across the county. So it's happening countywide. It's not that we're just like taking something from one district.
I get that.
Yeah.
I don't think we're
Okay.
implying that, but so it sounds like that error is treated as a supplemental, basically, and it gets put into the bucket, and it doesn't get allocated to the district as it would have had that mistake not been made. That's what you're saying.
For the current year.
No, I know, but
yeah.
am I understanding that correctly? So in essence, if the auditor, or the assessor makes a mistake, it's to the detriment of the district or the area, the assessment zone it's in, and it benefits the rest of the districts. Is that what I mean? Is that?
Yes, any correction.
But are you saying that there are
downward.
that many errors that would affect the estimated increase in our assessed valuation?
Okay, so 3 separate issues here. So first of all, just to restate, any correction upward or downward anywhere throughout the county is going to increase the levy, and it's going to have that same impact on those apportionment factors.
We won't see it because we're basic aid.
Okay.
So
Okay, two different things. Supplementals, not the same as your apportionment factors. Okay, so I'm gonna take one at a time, all right? With the apportionment factors, because we didn't know of that value increase as of January 1st, it will not impact your apportionment factors. In other words, you're not gonna get credit for it in a sense this year. But that value increase, we're gonna know about that next January, and that'll just be a bigger increase for your next year's apportionment factors, meaning you get a bigger mini slice of the pie next year, okay? So that's how we're apportioning that piece. The supplemental taxes are where we're taking that, so let's say that the property that we used in the example sold in November, so we know about it before January 1st. That would affect your factors for the current year. But because it occurred in the middle of that same year, there is going to be a supplemental bill for the current year. Again, because you're basic aid, you won't get a portion of that. And that's just the way the supplemental laws are written. And I'm assuming that there's good reasons for that in the way that the laws were written. Okay.
I think I understand what you're saying there as far as the supplementals go, but that still doesn't address what we're seeing in reality as far as our increased property values
Right.
go.
And so the increases in the property values, again, goes back to the items on this page. we see that, but even, if we go back here, we see the really big growth and a lot of what you hear in the blue and the green lines. You are having good growth, but it's not as much. We see that even though you hear about the market going crazy, if that's only 7.5% thereabouts, 5 to 10 to be more general, percentage of the properties in your district, the other 90% of those are only getting 2% on the good years, and this last year only 1%. So that's a big hit. That's 90% of
well, it's a 50% reduction.
And if you're talking 5%, you know, that's a percentage off of your estimate.
Would it be fair to say then that the biggest reason for the reduction in our increase was due to the low CPI? Would that be? I'm just trying to understand how that could be, how that could be, how we could be, you see one thing, but in reality, we're not seeing that other 90% of the
absolutely.
properties out there.
So when we were looking at your growth percentages over the last few years, there were a couple years going maybe 4 or 5 years back when it was like in the mid 4s, and then like the last 3 years you're seeing 5 plus, and this year it may well have been more. But again, if 90% of the properties are only getting 1% growth instead of 2, that equates to a full percentage knocked off your growth.
Right there, I mean, that boils it down, and that explains the difference. And I mean, I'm sorry for being so pointed.
They're all very good questions, and it's totally arcane subject
matter.
Well,
it does. I mean, it almost seems like it's designed to be hard to understand.
It is, but one thing that
I'm not gonna comment one way or another on that.
But I will take the CPI in consideration in future projections.
Before I did for a long time, so he's more of a guru than
Well, I wouldn't go there. Trevor's group really does a good job. I'm really glad you guys are asking these questions, because no one in California really understands property taxes. And I'm not saying that flippantly. It's very complicated, and it's been over 40 years since they passed Prop 13. And the tangents and how the laws have been written, activities at the state, various propositions passed to make sure the state backfills school districts, put a lot of pressure on the state to make sure certain things happen. Like, they really pushed teeter for all the counties, because they realized if you got fully funded regardless of collections in a current year, took stress off their budget at the state level. So there's a lot of stuff in motion going around here. And one of your board members mentioned about, hey, gosh, these calendars don't line up.
Yeah.
That is such an understatement. You and every other district in the county itself, the cities, they all struggle with that same thing. Prop 13 really changed how taxes work, right? If you're in a non-Prop 13 state, you decide how much money you need, and you figure out what your revenue is. You send it to the assessor. We figure it out. We back into the number and say, that's the tax rate. That's what you get to collect, right? That's all gone with Prop 13. So it's very difficult. It's very convoluted. And I just wanted to comment that it's refreshing to see the dialogue here tonight, because it is really nasty stuff to get into the nitty-gritty of it. And you're struggling because everyone needs a nickel to make another nickel out of it, right? And you're seeing anecdotal stuff. This building just sold. My golly, how come I'm not seeing that in my property tax rolls? There's timing lags. There's difficulties, as Trevor said. And all the stuff that we do in the auditor's office is based off the assessor. So I want to give them fair credit. That's a separately elected office. It's up to them to actually generate that revenue number, or the assessed valuation. And they do a really good job overall when you think about all the property we have in our county. But they do occasionally. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't talk very loud. So, the assessor's office does a lot of good work, but it's really difficult, and they run into some issues with that. So anyhow, I just wanted to state that I appreciate that, and if you have some other questions, we'd love to dig in deeper for you if we can give you some better analysis. I know that we've been working with Maureen over time, and there's a lot of numbers in flux, and what I really hear is like, how do I plan my budget in January to build that budget and have it starting on July 1st. When the auditor's office, we can't give you final numbers on our firm estimates until September. And it's all because that's the way the laws are written. We get our data at the end of June from the assessor and from the state the end of July, and we're all kind of playing the same game there. So I can appreciate that, the flux that we're all playing with there. It's really tough. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and it's nothing, none of that was accusatory, but it's just, yeah,
No,
like you
no,
said,
it's-
just very
but
pointed.
it's
Questions. I mean,
fair frustration.
We have
we
to
just-
project
yeah,
3
we-
years out,
Yeah.
and when we have to project 3 years out on a number that doesn't even exist yet, it gets frustrating because that translates into,
Oh.
lower reserves, or that could be.
Or we have to lay people
have to
off,
lay
because
people
we
off.
have statutory obligations,
Oh, absolutely. I
with-
mean,
with-
we
with
worked with
staff.
districts in the past, where, it was a decision, do we keep the librarian or not, or the 3 librarians, or do we have to close a campus? It's very serious, and I can appreciate that, and I'm glad I'm not on the dais with you guys. Your decision-making is much more harder than mine. So, I appreciate that.
We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Any other
Thank you
questions
very
you may-
much.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I also appreciate the position of having to do that, because I work with the county executive office on the revenue budget, and they're asking me, it feels like every month, they're asking me for updates on the budget. So I'm telling them the same thing and having to try and come up with numbers that aren't there yet and figure out, or how things are gonna change. I don't know how many penalties we're gonna collect by the end of the year. I just don't know. We haven't passed the delinquent dates yet. So it's an ongoing thing. It's difficult with our calendars as well. And it's a lot of, spaghetti code written around it. So, yeah. Sorry, it's not a slick, easy answer, but we're happy to go over it with any, Maureen, if you need more help, we can arrange, do a series of conference calls for what's necessary. I think a lot of it is timing. That's really the big thing, that calendar and the numbers we're looking at, and by the time it filters through county ed to you guys, and the required J29 forms versus we're looking at it from a straight revenue. It does sometimes seem like it was structured to be difficult, but we're doing the best that we can. We're happy to entertain your questions anytime. Feel free to give us a call, or we'll work it out. Anything else you guys have?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Very
sir.
welcome.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ed. Thank you for coming.
All right, we'll move on to F5. We have no public comment this afternoon or evening. So move on to G1, warrants. The board is being asked to approve the warrants for the period of November 19th through December 9th of 2021, in the amount of $1,153,423.82. Issue once a week on Thursdays. May I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item G2A is a donation from Joe Gigantino to CHS PE Athletics in the amount of $24,669 to the CHS Physical Education. May I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve with gratitude. Joe was a class of '85 Warrior alumnus, so that's really
Awesome.
great to see
Yeah,
his
that's-
name on
That's
here.
quite a donation too.
Yeah.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item G3 is resolution number 21-890, resolution of the governing board delegation of governing board powers, duties, authority to make cash and budget transfers. May I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
This is a roll call, Andy?
Aaron.
Aye.
Jamie.
Aye.
Sally.
Aye.
Jamie.
Aye.
I'm aye.
Item G4, the board is being asked to approve the 21-22 first interim report. Do we have a presentation, looks like?
There you go. So we have our 21-22 first interim. I thought that was really a confusing, helpful presentation.
Well, when you finally got to the 1%
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
92%, I wish you'd said that in the beginning.
Yeah.
That made complete sense mathematically. That's it, that's the answer.
Yeah.
You got it, but it took an
Yeah, and the
hour to get there.
CPI, that never factored into anything I've seen, so.
So that was very helpful.
So, we are required under AB 1200 and AB 2756 to present financials at 5 different intervals. The 5th is only if you're qualified or negative. We are at the first interim reporting period, which shows actuals through October 31st. We are presenting a positive certification for our first interim, which means that we can meet our current and subsequent year obligations. We are in the category of 1,000 to 30,000 ADA, so we require a 3% district reserve. And then this is our property tax comparison from what we estimated at adopted to where we are at P1, which is the J29 we get from the County Office of County Education Office versus the County Tax Collector's Office. They differ a little bit. So from projected, and this is where that CPI, I think, comes in, and where we see these big high-profile homes that sell for $22 million, and we're not seeing that, or the cannabis farms that are being permitted and assessed, and we're not seeing that. That makes a little more sense. And so our projection versus our P1 estimate is reduced by $112,000. And I subsequently reduced the estimates for the 2 out years. You can see on the right to around 4.8%. You know, that may be a bit low, but I'm going to go back and do some retrending with this information, as convoluted as it is. So we're going to keep very conservative so that we don't end up reduced. What I will say, though, is we were trying to project the impact of COVID-19 during COVID-19. And the impact of COVID-19 is the 1% CPI that came a year and a half, 2 years later. So, you know, that's the challenge we have, is that you're not in it, you're after it. I will say subsequently, the state of California, if you're an LCFF district, the state revenues will lag about 2 years behind the economic forecast. So this is always a little bit not in the moment. So we will work on this, and I'll be working with Trevor and Ed. At first interim, it's the first real budget revision we make with all of the revenues kind of set by October and November at the state and federal level, and all the staffing assigned. The challenge will be, because we're presenting the total general fund, the challenge is going to be that revenues are still a moving target as far as grant money, and we are, and I'll get to this on the expenditure side, we are still struggling to fill staffing positions, so some of our priorities are shifting. On the revenue side, you'll see the state aid changed by the property tax adjustment. We have the unrestricted education protection account, the EPA, it follows our enrollment, ADA, and it's kind of a factor of LCFF. So that just went down slightly, and it does go down slightly as long as we're not at the same exact or growth ADA. And then special ed property taxes actually went up, and those are on the restricted side. That's calculated differently at the SELPA level. Our federal revenue is all restricted. We had changes to Title I, II, III, and IV. As our those programs are taken on our percentage of unduplicated pupil counts as well as our ADA. So our ADA is not growing, and the percentage of unduplicated pupils did go down slightly. That may be due to the challenge of during COVID we weren't collecting free and reduced lunch applications. It was so they're not as accurate as they will be moving forward now. So this is something that will probably change moving forward. And then we've added in our ESSER 2 and 3 money that was not in our adopted budget. So that came late in June, and then over the summer with the governor's budget and the allocations. And then special ed federal revenue changed very minimally. So we're increasing our federal revenue by $2 million. And then the state revenue, same. We have an increase in our state lottery revenue. This is the first year I've seen that they actually changed the lottery formula like permanently. Normally the lottery is very hard to predict, and it's been the same rate per ADA for many years, and this is the first time I've seen it actually go up and like set in that projection for future years. So that's an increase in state lottery revenue. And then on the restricted side, the same thing we're doing as we did in federal. We are adding the grants that we now know we are getting allocated. The Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant was not in the adopted budget. The Educator Effectiveness Grant was not in the adopted budget. Some change to the restricted state lottery. There's both sides. We have increase in special ed revenue, and that's coming from the SELPA. And those are in both in AB 602 funds as well as in some grant monies due to COVID funds coming in through the SELPA. And then our in-person instruction grant was in the adopted budget, and we subsequently used and settled that at June 30th in the one-time bonuses. So then the revenue and expense are removed out of this budget because we expended it last year. And then the ELO grant is part of what you see on the federal side, ESSER 2 and 3. In the adopted budget, when the state estimated the ELO grant, the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, it was in one resource number. The state did some shifting in their revenue sources, and they're now funding it out of 7 resource numbers. So some are federal, some are state, some are GER, some are ESSR, but it's all ELO grant. So it's coming out of the state revenue, it's up in the federal revenue, and it's like all over the place. You'll see equal adjustments on the expenditure side based on those factors. And then just a slight decrease in the ag incentive grant. And then the local revenue changes based on the school donations and the different revenues that come in for there's a lot of different buckets in the local donations. So overall, our revenue is increasing $1.3 million. On the expenditure side, we have, we go through this whole process with position control where all our vacancies are filled, retirees are out, people are assigned. So we really had a net change in about $5,300 from what was in adopted to now, which is very minimal. We took a fraction percentage of the staff accountant that is in my business office that is now, that 20% is now being charged to Measure U because he's doing Measure U bond counting. Our unemployment rate, I did bring this in the October update, was reduced. So we have a $90,000 reduction of expense due to that UI rate decrease. And then we increased our lottery budget on the expense side equal to the revenue side. And this is really all for curriculum and site purchases. Our utilities, we kind of realigned them. That's just a minor adjustment. Our indirect costs, we're collecting more indirect costs based on the grants that we added back in for ESSER 2 and 3. And then when you see the changes to restricted programs, that 1.9 increase corresponds with the grants that we added in the budget that we didn't know in June. So it all reconciles. So our expenditure budget is increasing by 1.9 million. Total summary, at adopted, we had a deficit of $120,095. At the first interim, it's $660,076. That is in large part because of categoricals, and the next slide I'll go into how that's broken down. So we had an 8.93% reserve at adopted, 8.88 now. That 8.88 decrease is in large part due to the restricted side of the budget. That deficit spending is how you spend the fund balance. So it's not in the red or it's not unbalanced, it's that you received the revenue in a prior year that now goes into fund balance and you spend it by deficiting. So you don't count revenue twice. When you see the unrestricted column, it's surplus. So we still have a surplus, 32,483. It's black. That's a good number. So as your fund balance goes down, the reserve goes down just a little bit. We put it side by side with our actuals to date. The actuals to date are about where they should be, right in line. And the interim isn't really intended, when AB 1200 was passed, it was intended to say, at this point in time, are you where you should be? So if your payroll is at 36%, you got problems. You're not gonna make it the rest of the year. Your budget's off. And then our multi-year at a glance, and this is with the reduced property taxes in the out years. We're looking right now at an 8.88 reserve, in 22-23, 11.5, and then 15.4 moving out. So this, the out years all include step and column and all those statutory increases as we calculate our multi-year, as well as a reduced property tax increase. And as we look at that, you'll probably get a more finite number. And then this is really small to see, I understand that, but I wanted to update everybody on the COVID money. So the COVID funds are really kind of complicated now. They don't make anything too easy. Everything that's in the striped shade is already expended, and we've already concluded those years. And then you'll see down in the lower part where the green bars are, you'll have some that are expended through 21, and then everything through 22, 23, and 24. Those are the periods of time we're allowed to spend the grant. That doesn't mean we have enough money to go that far out. And you'll see how the balance is at June 30 and what's available in the grant. So total of $8.1 million that we've received in COVID funds. I also wanted to give you kind of an idea of where we are on the big pots that we have left. The ESSER 2, the ESSER 3, and the ELO grant funds. And there are a couple more that we'll be bringing at second interim and to the board at later dates throughout the year with some of the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, which is not the ELO grant. I mean, they had to call it the same thing. This kind of shows you what the budget was, and actually what that would be the revenue base, how much we've spent in staffing, and what is obligated, meaning it's not staffing, but we've encumbered funds. We are purchasing lots of things with this money. We have purchased lots of things in this money to support schools, to support distance learning, to report outdoor schools, et cetera. Those are already obligated through purchase orders. And then the remaining funds are the funds that have yet to be obligated in the grant. The charts below show you how many people we're paying for out of this money and what they're doing at each school. It's a heavy investment in intervention, both in instruction and in support, in our custodial and ground staff. It's really making sure our campuses are supporting our students, even though we're still in kind of some COVID limitations. So I thought this was a really good illustration on that side. And this is something we'll be looking at with what balances and we have remaining and how long we can afford to do this. And that is my interim.
Thank you, Maureen.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
They're very clear and easy to understand,
Yeah.
Maureen. I really appreciate.
I feel like I talk too fast.
No,
it's great.
I think you've put us all through a master's class in school budgets, and I think we're all. I think I'm smarter for listening to you because I understand the budgetary process much better than I did pre-Maureen. And
Thank you.
and so I know. I mean, I think it's really valuable for everyone because it's so clear and open and easy to understand for everybody who wants to pay attention to it. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's the goal.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the first interim report?
I move to approve.
A second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item G5, the board is asked to approve the second reading of the 21 to 26 Educator Effectiveness Grant in the amount of $613,718. Is that supposed to be to 2026?
Yes.
It is, okay.
5 years.
5 years, got it. All right, the grant was part of the governor's enacted state budget for 21-22 to provide professional learning for teachers, administrators, and classified staff who interact with students with designated focus areas. The grant requires that a plan be developed and adopted by the governing board by December 30th, 2021. The CUSD Educator Effectiveness Expenditure Plan template is being presented for review. Includes the addition of one full-time equivalent AP instructional coach for CHS and reimbursement for all credentialed teachers continuing education up to $500. The plan was presented for first reading at the November 23rd, 2021 board meeting. And I get a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item G6, the board is asked to approve the installation of bottle filling stations and sensor-operated sink faucets at Aliso and Canlido schools by M&M Mechanical Incorporated. The cost to install fixtures by M&M Mechanical is $56,285 and will be paid with ESSER3 funds. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
I-
Oh,
oh,
no,
sorry.
no questions for you.
No, I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this, we're furnishing the stations.
Yes.
And this is there's several proposals here, right?
Yeah, yep.
Okay, so it's all inclusive.
It is.
That 57,000 is all these
All
proposals
four
out of that?
proposals.
Okay.
So we did the 4 proposals because they're gonna be done in phases. And, in talking to the county and with bidding requirements, we were allowed to put them all together as one board item because we're still working under the emergency resolution that was passed in March of 20. And, the governor's, executive order still is in effect through March of 22. So we don't have to formally bid this, but we wanted to include them all and just keep them separate because they're going to be doing the work under separate periods of time.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Good. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item G7, the board is asked to approve the replacement of outdoor lunch tables for all school sites from Great Western Recreation. The cost to replace outdoor tables from Great Western Recreation is $91,572 and will be paid with ESSER3 funds. You get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
In a second.
Did you hear that? Second?
Second. I did have a question on this one. So you said for all schools, is this including Summerlin's getting rebuilt, or is that included in the Measure U?
No, it's included, Summerlin's included in this.
So this
Yeah.
will include once the school is built? Okay. Is there any other questions? Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Item H1, the board is asked to approve change order number 2 for the campus modernization phase 3 project at Aliso Elementary School. Change order number 2 is in the amount of $36,401.23, which will bring the contract sum to $2,433,848.10, paid with Measure U funding. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Item H2, the board is asked to approve change order number 1 for the CHS Admin Student Services Building. This change extends contract time by 3 days. Change number 1 is in the amount of $27,126.39, which will bring the contract sum to $3,308,778.39, pay with Measure U funding. May I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item H3, the board is asked to approve electrical wiring by Scott and Sons Electrical. The cost for installation and programming is $2,875 and will be paid with Measure U funds. And just to clarify, this is electrical wiring for the CHS gym project. May I get a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
A second?
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item H4 is the fabrication of door brackets for CHS Gym Hold Open Project by M&M Mechanical. This is the fabrication portion of the project. The cost to fabricate brackets by M&M Mechanical is $4,901. And will be paid by Measure U funds. Making a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Item H5 is the purchase and installation of door holders for CHS Gym Hold Open Project by Low Voltage Solutions. This is the purchase and installation portion of the project. The cost door holders and installation is $1,250 and will be paid by Measure U funds. Making a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item H6, ground restoration from portable removal by All Around Landscaping Supply. The board is asked to approve the restoration of outdoor play area at Canalino by All Around Landscaping Supply. The cost for ground restoration at Canalino in the amount of $8,191.87 and will be paid with Measure U funds. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second?
I'll second. I
I'll-
have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is on the old playground?
This is where the portables were removed. They just left this,
On the asphalt
Yep.
playground?
yep, it's a hole in the asphalt.
So will that eventually be repaved?
That's not scheduled to be repaved. Right now, we've come up with a solution to put heavy traffic bark, and Jim worked with Principal Jamie Pursoon on what would be adequate, and so they felt that would be fine.
Good. Oh, did you have a question? All those in favor?
Aye.
H7 is a contract with Kruger Benson Zemer Architects for furniture selection at Summerlin School. The estimated fee is based on the actual time spent billed and an hourly rate of $125 to $200, not to exceed $19,750. The fees will be paid with Measure U bond funds. And a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
Second?
Any questions?
I have a suggestion for this, because in talking to some of the students at the high school, and their impressions of the furniture, not all of it is it all looks really good, but it isn't necessarily as functional maybe as to the students as we as adults may think it might be. So I think it might be good to maybe incorporate some student feedback in the student and teacher staff feedback in the furniture selection.
It's a really good suggestion. This is going to be the same that has been put in all the classrooms in Catalina and Aliso. So that would be really good to get in feedback from both schools on whether or not it's
See what's working for them, what's
Yep.
not, and I'm speaking more of the furniture at the secondary level that I've heard about. I haven't heard from the primary level, but
Yep,
I
yep,
just
yep.
think it might be a good idea.
Will do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item H8, approval of purchase and installation of new door at opening number 6 in the CHS gym with McGillivray Construction. Since this is a fire-rated door, a new door was required to meet fire code. The cost of the purchase and installation is $5,206.37 and being paid for with Measure U funds. May I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve?
Second?
I'll second.
Any questions?
This is the one clear at the back, or it's on the double doors at the back?
No.
The one on the side that's on the east side?
Yes,
Just a single door?
it's a single door.
And you took away the steps and the little concrete?
That I don't know. I think this is the door going into the locker rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Have we identified any more of these
No,
conflicting
this is it.
regulations and functionality issues?
No, there's 3 things that we're correcting. The door, this door, and because it's a fire rated, you can't re-drill holes, so we're getting a whole new door. We're not doing it as a change order, we're doing it outside the GMP, which is actually better for us. You saw that we're doing the hold open for those are the doors from the lobby into the gym. In order, the DSA, new DSA, or the updated DSA code does not allow them to have stoppers opening them. The only way that you can hold those doors open is if you have a electrical system that can detect when to release that. So those are fire rated doors. And so that's what all of that is for. So that is the second thing. And then the last thing is we're just replacing, we're installing a few other light switches. So you don't have to walk across the gym to turn a light on or off where you're right. I mean, that just wasn't done right. So those 3 things are the projects that we're doing in the gym, and that's it.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item I1 is our personnel summary. This meeting, we have 5 assignments, 2 resignations, 5 coaching corrections, 2 co-curricular assignment changes, and 1 release during probation. And get a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second?
Any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we're on to our board announcements. I believe, Jamie, you wanted to share some information from a meeting you went to?
Yeah, so I was able to go to the California School Board Association Annual Education Conference about 2 weeks ago. Thank you to the district for sending me. The district paid for my registration. I took care of my food and hotel, my lodging. That way it wasn't any undue burden for the district. But it was a really amazing opportunity for me to meet with other school board members and superintendents and administrators and parents and people who really want the best for the kids in their district. A lot of it focused around family engagement, culturally appropriate family engagement, meeting people where they're at, really trying to close the learning gap for our EL students, and how to integrate more learning into their classroom to make it integrating STEM into the EL program, especially into the long-term English learner program. There's one school district integrated the robotic CTE program into their long-term English learner program, because then you're getting math and science and reading and writing and all the things, and really understanding that. One school district completely deconstructed algebra. They saw that the lowest scores for their English learners was in math, but specifically at algebra at the high school level was the biggest drop, and their students had the hardest time coming back from that. So as a team, the algebra team, the math team, completely deconstructed their algebra program and rebuilt it with a totally different approach. And the natural consequence of that or outfall of it ended up being increased algebra scores for all students, and it wound up working out really well for them. And it was really neat to hear how these districts they said, hey, I have this idea of how we can move our district forward. We can do better for our students instead of just the status quo. And so that was really amazing. And then a lot of it was meeting parents where parents are at for family engagement. I feel like we talk about, how do we engage the families? How do we do this? How do we do that? And we have a lot of similar opportunities that are available within our district, but kind of Bakersfield Unified School District, which is a huge district and has way more resources than we do. But they have Parent University, which they offer free to their parents, and they have certain modules that they offer, and it was really great. And they said, okay, we're gonna have a parent. What if you were brand new here and you came onto our campus? Would you be able to figure out how to get to the administration building? Would you understand the signage? Would this make sense to you walking through here? And have parents go through it with that mindset. And then the simple things of signage and feeling welcome on campus, which of course right now during COVID is moot. but just having their families feel comfortable coming on campus, feeling like they can approach somebody that will listen to them, that understands them, was really important. And then I got to go to a great workshop on CTE programs, and specifically the presenting county was Ventura. So Ventura County their county office of education has an amazing CTE program. They actually have a facility with 14 classrooms. They have partnerships with the Navy at Wainimi. They get to use multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment because of that. It's pretty cool, but they said they'd be willing to set up a time for us to come and tour their facility, which I think would be really great, as a great resource to how we can bolster our CTE program. And I'm really excited for what we can do with that. But I'd love to, if there's any of our staff that would like to reach out to me about some of the different workshops I went to and the different things that other districts are doing with English learners or anybody, I'd be happy to share the slide decks with you from those presentations and talk to you about it. So thank you to the district for letting me go, and it was a really great opportunity. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jamie. That was
Thanks
a
for
great
reporting
report.
back. Yeah.
We'd be interested in the slide decks.
Yeah.
The leadership team would be very interested.
Wonderful.
So if you'd be kind enough to send them over.
I
Yeah,
will.
thank you so much.
Certainly.
Anybody else?
I was just going to congratulate our new music teacher, who I've forgotten his name.
Mr. Martindale.
Martindale. And his students from what I understand, I unfortunately couldn't go, a very good winter concert the other night.
It was excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I heard that.
It was, I don't want to say surprisingly good, but it was surprisingly good.
That's exactly what I heard.
The high school was
Yep.
very good.
So
and-
congrats to all.
Yeah, yeah. So I was impressive.
Good.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Good to hear you, exactly.
And sorry, one other takeaway I had from the conference was really allowing the students to engage the district and creating that space. So things like our student member, they had a panel of student school board members up along with student school board members from all over the state. And the idea of, they said while they understand and appreciate when you say, hey, I know you have whatever going on, like, feel free to go, like, they're here to participate and be a part of this. And, you know, that's how we can get the student engagement in what we're trying to do, is if they're here and they can have their voice heard when we talk about the different things, and they feel heard and they get the opportunity to share that in more than just a written statement, and they can be part of the conversation, and that's how we can give them that seat at the table. And so, well, I mean, yes, it's finals, so yes, tonight, go home. But I think it'd be really great to have our student representatives actually participate through the meeting with us. And that was one of the biggest takeaways, was really, instead of just giving them, you know, to say we have a student representative and they're here and then they leave, they aren't really representing the students throughout the meeting and the different things that we're talking about. And so there's their point of view. And so I'd love to be able to figure out a way to engage our student member more with the board. Thanks, sorry.
Any other board announcements? Great. Anything we need to know about, Monica, for calendar? We're all good? All right. Then we will adjourn this meeting. See y'all next time.
Next year?
Next year. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh,